Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're going to be doing What If Alf Landon won in the 1936 election. This was requested by a commenter. And so first off, we give Alf Landon the closest states that FDR won that would get him over 270, or over how many electoral votes is needed for him to win the election. And thus this gives him 273 electoral votes to FDR's 258. Making him the 33rd president. What he would need to do is he would actually need to campaign and probably distance himself from FDR, as he was a very liberal Republican. He supported much of FDR's New Deal program. So he would need to distance himself and also point out the bad in FDR's first term. In Landon's first term, we would still see a tax on marijuana. The Civil Aeronautics Authority would be formed. He would establish a minimum wage, and we would also see a Japanese embargo. Going on to 1940, Alf Landon would be a very semi-popular president, and Democrats would nominate former Vice President John Nance Garner, who would win the Democrat primary fairly easily, and he would choose Alabama Senator William Bankhead as his running mate. Though this is pretty much one of those examples of why you don't run a one-term vice president against an incumbent after the president they served under just lost, because it always ends up being a much worse beatdown for them, as Republican President Alf Landon would defeat Democrat Vice President John Garner 322 to 209 to win re-election. And in Landon's second term, the only thing notable is that the U.S. would, of course, enter World War II. 1944, Republicans would nominate New York Governor Thomas Dewey, and Democrats would nominate Virginia Senator Harry Byrd. For their running mates, Dewey would choose Ohio Governor John Bricker, and Harry Byrd would choose Tennessee Congressman Cordell Hull. And so, riding off of Landon's momentum and the fact that the incumbent party that never loses an election if there is a war going on, typically like a major war, not like the Afghanistan war, that abomination, typically they don't lose an election, and thus it's going to be the same here. Thomas Dewey would defeat Harry Byrd. Republican Governor Thomas Dewey would defeat Democrat Senator Harry Byrd 331 to 200 to become the 34th president. And so quite a bit happens in Dewey's first term. He would still drop the hydrogen bombs. He would do what Harry Truman did, and he would drop the hydrogen bombs on Japan, thus ending World War II. He would also sign the Rescission Act of 1946. He would grant the Philippines independence. He would join the UN. The Cold War would still begin in this timeline. He would sign the Taft-Hartley Act, which would restrict labor unions. He would create the CIA, Department of Defense, the Joint Chiefs of Staffs, and the National Security Council. We would experience the Second Red Scare. He would enact the Marshall Plan, which would give economic aid to multiple countries that were fighting during World War II. And, of course, he would sign legislation that would end segregation. Going on to 1948, the final election we're covering, because after this, things pretty much just go back on the timeline. Republicans would renominate President Thomas Dewey, while Democrats would nominate Missouri Senator Harry Truman. And since both these candidates are pro-civil rights, essentially, Strom Thurmond, the South Carolina governor, would still run an independent a third-party bid. And Alvin Barkley would be chosen as Harry Truman's running mate, as per usual. And thus, this time around, instead of Thomas Dewey losing to Harry Byrd, Thomas Dewey as the incumbent would be fairly popular, especially after the post-World War II situation, and that the Great Depression ends with us entering World War II. He would be very, very popular. And thus, Republican President Thomas Dewey would defeat Democrat Senator Harry Truman and Dixiecrat Governor Strom Thurmond 305 to 187 to 39 to win re-election. And in his second term, he would help create NATO. He would pass the Housing Act in 1949, which would expand the federal role in mortgage insurance in mortgage insurance. The federal government's role in mortgage insurance and all that. He would also order the development of the hydrogen bomb, we would also enter the Korean War, and since there is no FDR, there would be no amendment that would limit the president to 2 terms. And of course, like I said before, we would go back on the timeline after this. So after this, Eisenhower would be elected president and serve 8 years, and Kennedy, then Johnson, so on and so forth. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm sorry that this was a shorter video, but this is just how I see everything going on. Don't forget to follow my Twitter at Chaotic Politics. This is the Chaotic One saying peace.